So, welcome to Copper Toxicity, and I'm making this for all the clients who I have said you have hidden copper, biounavailable copper, low copper. I want you to understand the importance of copper and the problems it has created from some of the environmental and pass through on in utero and the other types of ways that it can become toxic in your system. Now, copper, when it's let in nature to go oxidize, it turns to a beautiful green verdigris, and that is a common name for a green pigment that is obtained through the application of acetic acid to copper plates or natural patina, formed when copper, brass, or bronze is weathered and exposed to air or seawater over a period of time. Just wanted to give you that little bit of information, not that it has any pertinence to what we're going to talk about today. So the implications, the most commonly encountered imbalance on tissue mineral tests. Many metabolic dysfunctions are related to the copper imbalance, and health problems like anorexia, fatigue, PMS, depression, anxiety, headaches, allergies, hyperactivity, and learning disorders. This is an evil little mineral if it's not kept in balance. So let's talk about the sources. Now, this is where hair mineral analysis starts to get interesting, because the minute that I talk about copper to people, they go, I don't know, I don't use anything copper. And we have to go back to that first stress response and how it depletes minerals, especially zinc, and how the body starts to uptake toxic metals. And toxic metals are going to have a really large effect on the displacement of your macro minerals, which is going to have create an imbalance at copper, calcium, estrogen, copper. So environmental copper exposure can be a problem, but more than likely it's adrenal gland insufficiency or exhaustion, where you have gotten your body into such a stress response that your adrenal glands are really not functioning where they should be, especially slow oxidizers. And with a zinc deficiency, you're just setting yourself up to start storing copper and not being able to utilize it properly. Congenital or in utero copper toxicity, especially if the mother was on birth control pills. And we're going to talk about some supplementation too while we're on that. And then the copper personality, and we'll go through that in a minute. So let's look at environmental copper. So if you think that you may have had some problems with environmental copper, it would have been copper water pipes with acidic water. So if your pH on your water is too acidic, it's going to draw the copper off the pipes and you're going to get copper toxicity. Now, one of the first ways that you would notice this is you may start to get tooth decay because the copper is now becoming toxic in your system and more than likely biounavailable. So your teeth are going to start to really become a problem of that. Copper in the right position is going to make your teeth healthy and strong, but when it is in too much or too little, it's going to become detrimental to your structure of your bones and your teeth. Copper cookware with acidic water. Copper cookware is fine. The Romans and the Greeks used copper because of its ability to be able to kill bacteria. So it is not a bad thing, and your system can handle that. But if the water is not pH balanced, it's going to start to draw that copper out of that bowl or out of that cookware and into your body. Water can get contaminated with copper sulfite. That is a yeast or a fungicide where they'll use that to kill fungicides and yeasts, usually in pools or possibly ponds. If you get runoff from that, be careful. Birth control pills and IUDs are notoriously for copper toxicity because birth control pills use copper to not allow the it almost is like a sterilization tool. Same thing with copper IUDs. And one of the best ways to start to look at if you're trying to get pregnant is looking at your copper to zinc ratio. If you can get that ratio in a good place and you're having trouble getting pregnant, it does help tremendously in that process of getting your body more fertile. Vitamin and mineral supplements, and I say this again with prenatal supplementation, copper is frequently added to prenatal vitamins, not knowing if the woman needs it or not. So your biochemistry is going to be really indicative of if you need copper or not, and the amounts of copper. So if you're giving somebody copper that doesn't need copper, now you can create a toxicity to it. So watch for those. I always tell my ladies who are pregnant, be careful, do not ingest iron, and be careful of your copper. You know, the one size does not fit. Matter of fact, one size never fits all. One size fits one person, right? Everybody is bio-individual, and each person is going to have a completely different cut of that garment, and that is for everything. We want to have a personalized garment. We want to be the queen and kings of our life. We don't want to just settle for whatever somebody is going to give us. So supplementation is very specific to individuals. Vegetarian diets, and anybody out there who is not a meat eater, please think of this. It's soybeans, nuts, tofu, avocados, and some grains are very high in copper. Occupational exposures, plumbers, welders, and machinists, etc., because there's plenty of other people in that. You would know if you're working with a lot of copper, especially if you're using heating tools and it's airbound. You're going to want to probably make sure that you get some hair mineral analysis. And then dental appliances, I'm not quite sure what they're using now, but older crowns and fillings sometimes had copper in them. So adrenal gland exhaustion was that second one, which I said is more likely to be the issue with most copper toxicities, or biounavailability is more what I see when you have it in your body and you can't utilize it. Diminished adrenal activity is the single most physiological reason for copper problems. The adrenal gland activity is required to stimulate the production of ceruloplasmin and the primary copper binding protein. When adrenal activity is insufficient, ceruloplasmin synthesis in the liver declines. Now, we just said the liver, and where does copper like to store in the liver? Where does iron like to store in the liver? And if copper isn't bioavailable, then it does not allow the iron to be properly utilized. So now we have the liver really having some issues with releasing the minerals and utilizing them that it has storing in it. Copper that is not bound cannot be used, and unbound copper begins to accumulate in various tissues and organs, the liver being one of them, reproductive system, kidneys, and there are a few others. 70 to 80% of people show weak adrenal glands, and I would say that is probably being on the light side. I think I'm seeing more like 80 to 85%. So the roles and the functions of copper in the body: energy production, female reproductive system, and blood formation. The functions: circulatory, structure of blood vessels, aorta, and heart muscle. The blood, formation of hemoglobin. And there's that hemoglobin iron, right? So hemoglobin iron is, when you eat red meat and it's bloody, that's hemoglobin iron. That is part of the function, is to take that iron and have it utilized into the blood as part of that hemoglobin iron system. Nervous system, maintenance of the myelin sheath on the nerves. So if you have too much or too little, you're going to have problems with that myelin sheath. And multiple sclerosis is the breakdown of the myelin sheath of the nerves. Reproductive, essentially, it's essential for fertility and your menstrual cycle. It is also responsible for most of your moods and emotional changes during premenstrual syndrome. So essential for fertility. I just said that a few seconds ago. Anybody having trouble getting pregnant, go get your hair tested. Endocrine system, the synthesis of stimulatory neurotransmitters, musculoskeletal, bone and connective tissue structures. So somebody who doesn't have enough copper can have the chance of bones not properly forming, hence the scoliotic structures. Could be a genetic predisposition to not being able to utilize iron properly, and then copper doesn't have the same function and role that it needs to have. It also can be on the other side. If you have too much copper, you can have those hypermobility issues where your joints are too flexible, and we'll see that in POTS syndrome. The integumentary, the skin, needed for skin, hair, nails, and pigments, and then energy production for the electron transport system. Zinc deficiency is another reason why we might have copper toxicity. And zinc and copper, I say they have a marriage because they're the exact opposite. They're husband and wife. So like a great relationship is when your spouse or your partner, your significant other has the exact opposite of you. So where you lack, they pick up, and that's zinc and copper. They have a really lovely balance together that is super delicate, and if one thing doesn't balance out, then everything goes a little haywire. Copper's zinc's primary antagonist, and when it's deficient, copper tends to accumulate in storage organs, especially the liver. And zinc deficiencies are, number one, stress. Any kind of stress increases zinc excretion, and especially right at the beginning when sodium comes up really high at that first point where aldosterone is secreted from the adrenal glands and the kidneys activate, that sodium, zinc goes poof. It's like that's the first thing that goes. So if you're already on a zinc deficient diet, then now you're going to really start to see copper start to accumulate. High sugar and carbs lowers your tissue zinc. So if you're a fast oxidizer and you're a carb addict like I used to be, you're going to like wipe your zinc out. And that's where you start to get that pre-diabetes, where your zinc just isn't there for those functions of keeping all of those levels of calcium, magnesium, sodium, potassium in the right place. Of course, that vegetarian diet, the main source of zinc is meat, red meat. Very important. I know a lot of people don't want to eat meat, but there are very, very responsible ways of having just a little bit. There's really great farms out there that are doing animal husbandry, and if you're looking at it and you're not looking at it as a vegan, the retrospective veganism, then there are some great farms out there. One of my clients' nephews just opened one up that is called DSP Meats, and it's out west, and they have a beautiful piece of property that they're raising really sustainable beef on. He's an amazing chef out west, so someplace to look into if you are if you're looking for someplace really responsible. That I know offhand. I know that personally. So DSP Meats. Low levels of zinc are in our soil, and we talked about that a little bit, of trying to get your soil balanced. You can use seaweeds. There's some great companies out there that have natural boosters, and you can have your soil tested and get some nice natural boosters to get your soil up so that you can plant your own food. And of course, refined food. Stay away from the big boxes. Go to the smaller companies. People always ask me, how do you know? Well, rather than being on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, whatever it is, take one of your boxes of food, look at the back of it, and look up the company that made your food and see who makes it. I was just very discouraged because one of the Siete chips that I make got bought out by I think Pepsi or something. And I was so disappointed because it was like a family that started it. And I'm like, well, nah, I got to find somebody else now. And that's what I do. I mean, I will not support these big companies once I find out that they've bought these little guys out. So we have to support those little farms. So look those people up and you will find out very quickly when it says about, and, check it out. And then, put it out there and say who owns it into the universe. And, even if you have to Google that, that's the only thing I'll say to Google, because I don't like Googling things. But you could put that out there and try to see if you can find some dirt on who really owns it. And usually it's pretty easy when you type in addresses and you start finding out where people are. I actually plugged in an address for a company that was selling honey, and I couldn't find any beehives on the Google map. And it was just a warehouse. And so there was nothing saying where their apiary is. And I just said, no, I want to see an apiary nearby, a manufacturing plant, or at least I want to see like some type of a correlation there. So there's a little bit of private detectiveness that you have to put into your food, but it is well worth it. You do not want to be eating foods that don't have any nutrition in them. And of course, you can be born deficient. That does not help, and that's probably a lot of children right now, especially with the copper toxicities being handed down. Now, zinc, just a little bit more on zinc. Some sources are oysters, herring. Now, oysters sometimes can be high in nickel, so be careful that you're conscientious about where your oysters are coming from. Meats, beef, lamb. Beef again, so it's telling you twice. And pork liver. Nuts and seeds, sunflower and pumpkin seeds. And by the way, if you're eating really well raised pork and beef and lamb, you can eat their glandular organs. It's actually quite homeopathic to eat the glandular and the organs in animals. So everyone's like, oh, toxicity. Well, yeah, it was toxic if you fed it toxicities. But if it was raised properly, then those organ meats are absolutely fantastic for you. Cheeses, wheat germ, brewer's yeast is not only high in zinc, but it's really high in potassium as well, and that's a very difficult mineral to get enough of. Maple syrup, bone meal, gluten, and tea. Gluten is the part of the wheat that glues the outer husk in to make bread. So even though we have this gluten on the brain thing, in an organic wheat seed, it's organic gluten. That's why people can eat European breads, because their wheat isn't loaded with glycophosphates. I think I said that right. I'm trying to go off of some of these with my brain, and I'm at the end of my day here. So the roles in the body: activator of many key enzymes, growth and development, male reproductive system, insulin production and secretion, prevention of cadmium and copper toxicity. So male reproductive system, isn't this cool? So copper is soft and zinc is hard. Copper is your female herb and zinc is your male herb. And copper in higher levels will make men a little bit more feminine, and zinc in higher levels will make women a little bit more masculine. So it's very interesting how you can really change personalities by balancing things out. So you'll notice too sometimes that people will soften over age, and that's because their sodium and potassium levels may have come down and their calcium and magnesium went up with their copper. So there's a lot of really cool biochemical individualities and biochemical personalities that you can look at. Now, symptoms and nutritional information. I'm going to go through this a little bit. I want to go through some of these symptoms because I think they're really important. So many people ask me, and we can see this on here associated with copper excess. So let's look at the absorption is going to be proteins. It's going to be increased by the presence of amino acids, diminished by protein intake or impaired protein digestion, and that inhibits copper absorption. And absorption is also hindered by alkaline intestinal pH. So if you're eating too much alkalinity, and that's why we said vegetarianism, it's going to hinder the absorption, which is why it goes toxic. The retention, normally copper is bound in the blood. We went through that to the ceruloplasm and the albumin. Organs with high copper content include liver, brain, heart, and kidneys. However, excess copper can accumulate almost in every organ of the body. Excretion is mainly through your bile in your gallbladder or your liver. Vitamin C can bind or chelate copper and facilitate its removal, but please do not start taking vitamin C to do this because you can end up with other problems. It's something that needs to be done over time. Zinc and manganese displace copper from the liver. Molybdenum and sulfur bind to copper and greatly facilitate its excretion, but that again, molybdenum can be toxic as well. So what are we looking at here? We are looking at, I'm going to start naming these. Those on the screen are some of them, but let me go through. Adrenal cortical hyperactivity, adrenal hypertrophy, adrenal insufficiency, agoraphobia, which is the dread of open spaces, allergies. These are all copper toxic symptoms, or things that people may develop into more complex disorders. Alopecia, androgens, anemia. High tissue copper levels can cause relative manganese deficiency, and manganese is necessary to stimulate hemoglobin formation. Thus, anemia can result. Anxiety, arthritis. High tissue copper is frequently associated with osteoarthritis, autism. Calcium levels are elevated. Any abnormality which results in an inadequate ceruloplasm or ferritin, which is iron, can allow excess copper or iron to be absorbed, which would affect the brain. Both of these metals, copper and iron, are stimulants to the brain and might produce hyperactivity or autism. Cancer and high tissue copper, cancer and low tissue copper. In adult life, chronic tissue zinc and vitamin B6 deficiencies due to copper toxicity may predispose cells to cancerous change. Possible role for dietary copper in the metabolism of foreign compounds was first suggested by Sharpless in 1946. He observed that the addition of copper supplement to the diet of rats had marked protective effect against the hepatocarcinogenic action of the dye butter yellow. There's a reference that I have demonstrated that this protective effect of copper is associated with the stimulation of the hepatic metabolism of this dye to non-carcinogenic metabolites. So that is the copper's dietary role in metabolism of foreign compounds. Yeast infections, elevated ceruloplasm, elevated cholesterol, clinical syndromes like Wilson's disease, cystic fibrosis. Large amounts of copper have been found in fingernails of infants with cystic fibrosis. Mental depression, diabetes, dysinsulinism is frequently associated with elevated copper, and that's because excess tissue copper reduces zinc and manganese, interfering with glucose metabolism. I was talking about that before with diabetes. Estrogen levels are elevated. Failure to thrive syndrome. Fears, especially phobias. Bone fractures. Migraine headaches. Heart attacks. If zinc deficiencies predispose you to hypertension. Copper deficiencies can also result in sudden deaths. Heavy metal toxicities, because the heavy metals will accompany copper toxicity and then end up having slowing down the rate of metabolism. Hemorrhaging, Hodgkin's disease, hyperactivity in childhood, hypertension in adults, hypoglycemia, hypothyroidism, infections because it is part of the immune system, inflammation, iron storage diseases because of the relationship of iron, molybdenum, and lead, and possibly copper can cause iron storage diseases, kidney disorders, lead toxicities, liver detoxification and dysfunctions, metabolic dysfunctions like hyperactivity, psychosis, depression, arteriosclerosis, functional hypoglycemia, stuttering, premenstrual syndrome, senility, multiple sclerosis, myocardial infarction, which is a heart attack, nervousness, high copper and osteosporosis, low copper and osteosporosis. There's your high and low. Pancreatic dysfunction, panic attacks, pantothenic acid deficiency, which is a B vitamin, phobias. A lot of phobias are from copper toxicity or not enough copper because you have zinc deficiency. Pituitary hyperactivity, premenstrual syndrome, schizophrenia. There's a whole section on schizophrenia. And there's a lot of work done by Pfeiffer on schizophrenia. It's very interesting. He had broken down it into 4 sections in his books. Sexual inadequacy because of the zinc deficiency, strokes, tooth decay, urinary tract infections, vitamin deficiencies. So there is a very large group, plus you saw the ones that are on the screen here. The antagonistic nutrients are zinc, manganese, iron, calcium, molybdenum, sulfur, mercury, cadmium, and vitamin C. And your utilization nutrients are zinc, vitamin C, B6, sulfur, molybdenum, manganese, and iron. So it needs a lot to work and activate. Hair analysis. So biounavailable copper is often can be tricky to assess because copper may be present but unavailable for use, and this occurs anytime the adrenal activity is low. Copper oxidation types. Fast oxidizers generally are deficient in copper, and slow oxidizers are usually either high or biounavailable. Hidden copper toxicity is often normal on hair tests but may actually be locked into body tissues. So test indicators of hidden copper imbalance are the following. If I've told you your calcium level is greater than 75, potassium level is greater than 3, your sodium potassium ratio is less than 2.2 to 1, you have a mercury toxicity, that often indicates a high copper toxicity, a hidden copper toxicity. Copper levels less than 1.0, and your zinc copper ratio is less than a 6 to 1. Those are all indicators. So I look those up when I look at your hair mineral analysis, and I will tell you if I think you have a hidden copper imbalance. The reasons for supplementation with copper is to raise a low sodium potassium ratio and to enhance the retention of calcium into the tissues. So all of this information, some of this is from Dr. Larry Wilson, some of this information is from Dr. Watts, Dr. Eck, all the people who have been the forerunners of this wonderful hair analysis information to give to people. The only thing that I didn't go over and that I'd like to just talk about is elimination, because antibiotics can actually, when they're coming out, give because there's copper in them. This is the easiest way to see the elimination process. So you'll get, usually when it comes out of your body, you get a headache, skin rash, free-floating anxiety and insomnia, fatigue, and any chronic conditions that you may have muscularly or allergies or something. So I'm going to finish with this little story. So I'm a fast oxidizer. My husband's a slow oxidizer. We've been like that for a while. I fit into that classification. He fits into his classification, and we don't know how it happened. We have well water on our farm, and I noticed verdigris on the bottom of the shower. And so at the beginning of this, I said to you, I just wanted you to know that. And now I'm like, okay, well, here's the relationship to verdigris. So when water gets low in acidic in pH and low, I think it was a 5.9 or 5.6 on the pH scale, it actually draws the copper out of the pipe, and then it'll go, when it oxidizes out onto your sink or your bathtub or your shower, it turns green. It turns that verdigris. So I started noticing green on the shower, and I'm like, oh no. I said, there's copper coming out of our pipes. And we have so many different water things here. We have manganese and iron breakers and you name it. So I said to my husband, call the water guy up and tell him what's going on. And he said the only way he's usually seen that is with acidic water. And I'm like, acidic water? We just got our water test. It was fine. He came over, he tested it. It was in the 5s. What the heck? We have well water. So we had to put on a pH balancer onto our water. But in that short period of time when that got into our system, because that's a whole nother story, because the water system with the electrical outages went out, and somehow it got circulated because the water, it was on the wrong timer, but I'm not going to go into that. So salt ended up getting a little bit into the system too, but when this is just from the water. So when the water got into the system and it was acidic, and it started doing that. Once we got the pH in control, I started to try to think of how long it was like that. And it was probably a solid month. The amount of anxiety and free floating, I can tell you what that means, because I don't get anxiety. I never have. I'm not that type of person. I was driving to work, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm having butterflies in my stomach for no reason. That's free floating anxiety. For anybody who doesn't experience it, it's horrible. Copper does that to you. So all of these people that are walking around with anxiety, which I don't really understand until now, get your hair tested, get your copper in order, because I guarantee you that's going to help tremendously. But the long and short of that story is, get your pH checked on your water. You can do it yourself. I got a little kit now that I can do it. Now I don't need to do it anymore because I got the water softener, but which I hate to do. But get test your water regularly if you don't have that, because that's definitely going to be a problem getting copper into your body. So with that said, we've kind of gotten full circle with everything, and this is just one mineral. I'd like to do this with every mineral so that you can get a little bit of an understanding, but I'm starting with these really important minerals that so many people show up on their tests and have. The symptoms to copper are endless. So with that, thank you. If you have any questions, more than welcome to shoot me an email. And if you haven't had a hair analysis yet and you'd like one, then just let me know. We'll get you set up with that. Thanks.